Good afternoon. Wanted to talk about this router plane, this Paul Sellers router plane kit that I built last week. Sorry, excuse me. I wanted to do this video last week. I wasn't feeling all that great, so I kind of held back. I did make a few changes to the plane. Wanted to talk about. Firstly, the first change I made is I elongated this hole. The original hole was 1.75 inches in diameter. It was just, I couldn't see, the sellers recommends getting a rasp and sort of making a little escapement or a viewpoint, if you want to call it that. I tried that. It still didn't really help too much. I elongated it with a Forstner bit, a 3/4 inch bit, where I sort of made almost a half moon at the top radius of the original hole, and that does help you to see much better through the plane. But now that's not really going to make the plane work any better or worse. It's going to give you the ability to see what you're working on a little bit better. If it is a detriment at this point, I'm not aware, because I just actually finished this modification, and the other thing I did was I got the iron. I really sharpened the iron. It is extremely sharp right now. What I was running into, and I'm still running into this, is this frog here that you make, if you want to call it a frog. It's a 50-degree frog, 50-degree angles on each side. I personally think that angle is too steep, and I think 45 would have been better. Now, Sellers, he apparently made probably a few dozens of this plane before he settled on a design that he liked, and I'm not going to argue with his findings, his opinion, but this is just my very amateur opinion that this angle is too steep. But the real issue is not the angle of the frog so much as this groove you have to, sorry, there you go, that's probably a little better. The groove that holds the iron in place. Firstly, you need to get that to a very tight tolerance, which is not too difficult for anybody with a little bit of skill and a sharp chisel. You'll be able to get that really nice tight fit. But this is the most important. This is really the place where the plane will decide whether or not your plane works. This groove, the foot of this groove needs to be dead flat, and that's what I am running into here. You can see there I have a little, there you go, little oak shim that I made because the very base of the groove has a little divot in it. This, from my chisel work, it wasn't great, and walnut's not a great plain wood to begin with. It can be splintery. But when I was trying to use this, the steep angle and that little divot, the iron was giving. It was actually pushing back a little bit because there was nothing supporting it down there. The shim helps. Now, I haven't glued it in yet because I'm still undecided on whether or not I'm going to keep it. Otherwise, I'm still on the fence about this plane kit. I have a Lee Nielsen router here. The one drawback to this router where this really is nice is its width. Now you could obviously you could attach a base to this if you like, and that would alleviate some of those problems. But I really do like when I'm holding the router here, I have my hands over the knobs, my fingers are in front of the body of the plane. It gives a really nice level of control. This board here, just for fairness sake, was prepped with this. I didn't want to do a test run with a board to see. I said before in my other videos, I don't keep much scrap wood here. Most of the wood I do keep is good, usable wood. The few pieces of scrap I do have are really junk, and this is no exception. This, for example, was my first test with the router, and it took quite a while to get this flat. Not just because of the router, my limitations on tool making, but this board is just so bad. It was just falling apart as I was trying to plane it. So I'm going to try here to see. Now, as I said, in fairness, I did not use this on this board yet. So we'll see what happens. The adjustment on this is not as smooth as I would like. I mean, that's not doing too bad of a job. Let me see if I can go a little. That's taking a very, very fine little shaving there. A little bit too fine, really, for a router plane. You'd be here forever. Still really, that adjustment did not make much of a difference. Try that. Now that did a pretty nice job there. There's some splintering on the walls. So, and there is the groove. It's not incredible, but I mean, that would very likely work if you were making a housing for a shelf or a you know, your moldings, things like that. That should be fine. Little cleanup with really the walls are what need to be cleaned up with your chisel, and that's probably good to go. It's nice and flat at least. So I said I'm really on the fence with this. I mean, I'm an amateur. I freely admit that. My opinion doesn't mean much in the grand scheme, but I have woodworked enough. I've used enough tools to at least offer at least somewhat of an informed opinion. This, if we're talking money layout here, I probably spent hardware, knobs, this board. If I had the board I did have, but if I had to buy the board, this plane probably would have cost me in the $75 to $80 range. I'm not sure what Lee Nielsen's selling their routers for. Lee Valley really makes a nice one. Buying a used router, unless you're a collector, is really, they probably cost more than a new router. So that's really not a viable option in many cases. But I'm going to take a wild guess and say these router planes are running in the $150 to $175 range. Could be a little bit more. You're going to pay shipping and tax, obviously, in most places. So this plane probably costs, in terms of material, $100 more than purchasing a new ready-to-use one out of the box. It's also going to cost you time, and that's really for me, that's really the most important thing. Is, was it worth my time to make this plane? I don't know. I really don't have an answer. Generally I enjoyed it. There were some times I got frustrated. That happens in most projects. I learned a few things. I made a tool that's probably functional. Is it better than this? No, it's not. That's just speaking for me. I'm not a professional tool maker. There are people out there, I'm positive there are amateurs, guys like me who are hobbyists, weekend guys, who probably have the skill to make make this into a really highly functioning tool. I don't doubt that in the least. That being said, there are probably guys out there like me who can't make this tool functioning in a few hours in a weekend. They are going to struggle with it. They're going to have to make a lot of little adjustments, probably start from scratch at some point, which I nearly did with this. So that really, I said before, I really don't like recommending things. It's not my place. Everybody's different. There are certain tools that I would have no problem recommending. One of them being this Lee Nielsen router plane. It's an incredible tool. I've had it for years. I've never had an issue with it. It works great. It looks great. It's been sitting in my garage for many years now. It's not my garage is not climate controlled. It gets really, really hot and humid in the summer, and in winter it can get very cold. Just like today, yesterday, the welcome to Pennsylvania. Yesterday we had a day, it was 65 degrees and sunny and beautiful. Today we're lucky if we're going to hit 45, and it's cloudy and very humid, and by the end of the week we're going to be lucky if we're above freezing. So that all being said, in this environment, this tool has not only survived, it still works as good as, or even better than the day I purchased it. I don't know what the future's going to hold for this plane. It might turn out to be just a really good tool. I hope that's the case. But the real question is, as a hobbyist, as a home woodworker, and I'm sure that, I don't get many views on YouTube like a lot of other guys do, but of the views I get, I'm sure most of the people that are watching this are hobbyists just like me. And I really hesitate to say, go out and buy this. Not that there's anything wrong with it. Not that the hardware is great. It adjusts just fine. It's really, really good quality for the money that it costs. I've not one single complaint in terms of the quality of the material here. And I believe, I could be mistaken, but I believe even some of it is stainless, which is really nice. Because a lot of times it's difficult to find off-the-shelf stainless hardware unless you're purchasing it in bulk. the iron, here, you might be able to see if I can get that in there. You might notice that the scratch pattern is uneven. I tried to sharpen it by hand. It was too awkward. So I did use a guide. And when I used the guide, I would say the first couple of millimeters of the iron were, probably, I'm not a metallurgist, but junk steel, let's call it that. They fell off as soon as I applied it to the diamond plate. A couple of strokes and it kind of rolled over and fell off, and it was on an angle when it did that. So what I did, I sharpened it up. I got it ground back to a nice, straight line perpendicular to the side, and it did, because of the way I was grinding it, made it a little askew. It's not really affecting anything in that regard. This is very sharp. It's sharp. It's as sharp as my chisels. It's just how long it will hold up. It's hard to say. What you just saw me was the first real test of this plane. I told you before, I used this board here, and that was with the plane. That was before the plane I had even ever sharpened the iron. I was sort of testing it out to see what were the strengths, weaknesses, and all that. So the iron has turned out, it seems pretty solid. It took me a little while to get it ground. I'll be perfectly honest. It took me about an hour, I would say, of grinding, sharpening, honing, and that's typical for a new tool, especially one with a thick iron like this. A chisel, you could probably get it set up. A new chisel probably takes 15 minutes to set up, I would say, depending on the steel. And depending on your skill level, you can sometimes make it worse. But I'm very on the fence with this right now. And I don't know, I really don't know what type of recommendation to offer. Right at this very second, I'm inclined to say no. You might not really want to use this tool. Or attempt to make this tool if you are not, if you don't have a lot of experience. If you don't have a lot of experience making your own tools, I'm not even going to say experienced woodworking. There's very experienced woodworkers out there who've never made a tool before, and they're great woodworkers. They might not be great tool makers. It's two separate things. The skills do overlap, but they're not the same, not by a long shot. I have some experience tool making. I've made 3 or 4 hand planes, maybe half a dozen hand planes, a couple saws. I've made spoke sheave, things like that. Obviously, tools like mallets. These are real. This is more. That's not really skilled woodworking. They're more than it is, or skilled tool making than it is more skilled woodworking, I should say. But yeah, I don't have a real recommendation here. I'm sorry. I wish I'd be the first person to be super happy to tell you guys this tool is awesome. Go out and buy it, or go out and buy the kit. And make the tool. This shim here, it took me about 20 minutes to make the shim. So. Obviously planing down a shim to that thickness and to the correct width where it's perfectly going to fit in that groove is a little more difficult than it sounds. luckily, I did all these sharpening videos. Luckily, my jack plane over there, which was I used for the most of it, was really nice and sharp now. But yeah, I'm just very, very, very on the fence with this. I think I think that my own opinion is the angle's a little bit too steep. It does it have to be the typical 45? Maybe, maybe not, but maybe somewhere in between. Now, I suppose, and I don't want to speak for anybody, but maybe sellers chose 50 degrees because it probably works, and I'm sure it works. But more importantly, it's a nice round number. You tell somebody, oh, you're gonna have to make a frog and get it to 47 degrees. That might scare somebody off of attempting to make this, when there's really, the reality is there's no difference in planing from 47 degrees to 50 degrees to 51 degrees. It's really not. But round numbers sound better. I think that the steepness of the angle, it hurts more than it helps. But I guess sellers tried 45 and it didn't work as well as he'd like. I think what the issue there may have been is it would have made the plane thicker. The one thing I think I mentioned in my last video, I mean, on this plane, is there are, Paul Sellers recommends using a 1-inch thick board this dimension. The width isn't so much as important, or the length, I mean, isn't so much as important as the width and the thickness of the body of the plane itself. If you're using a 1-inch thick board, which is probably, I don't think you want to go too much thicker than that. You really can't go any thinner, because the hardware that is included will not allow you to do that. The hardware, the hanger bolts that come with this, they are really coming very close to the base of the plane, and I'm sure when you're screwing in here, if you're screwing this in at a 45 rather than a 50-degree angle, it might also be detrimental to the thickness of the wood. That is my guess. I could be dead wrong. But in my opinion, how this kit could be much better is a metal frog. Now, that probably defeats the whole purpose of what Sellers is trying to accomplish. But a metal, an aluminum, whatever is easiest, least expensive, an aluminum frog, excuse me, just a second here. My battery's running low. The weak point on this plane is this frog, this channel, more specifically the channel in the frog. If that is not perfect, I can pretty much guarantee you're going to have some issues with adjustments, with keeping the iron bedded. A metal frog will eliminate all that. It would eliminate any of the angle issues you might have with drilling perfectly perpendicular to a 50-degree surface, which is what you have to do here. It's not overly difficult, but it is not simple either. There are a few tricks you have to use to make sure that you're not going to mess up, because if you do, if you mess up this here, if you mess up this angle here, I would say by a degree, the whole plane is not going to function correctly. So, yeah, if you're asking me, I'm going to tell you no, I hate to say this, but I do not necessarily recommend this plane for a new woodworker, or even an intermediate woodworker. I think that the person who would benefit from a kit like this most is somebody who has a higher skill level, a person who has made their own tools before really knows how to use their chisels to make perfectly flat angled surfaces in tight spaces. Skills like that are really necessary. Otherwise, you're probably not going to get this plane correct on the first or even second try. If making tools is your thing, if you enjoy experimenting, if you have the free time, yeah, I would say maybe you want to try it. Maybe you want to give it a shot. It's not that expensive. It's really the main cost is your time. If you have the free time, if you don't mind spending your free time experimenting on projects like this, then go for it. If you're looking to make a tool that's usable, making and using a tool that you can use on your everyday projects, this might frustrate you a little bit. I don't want to discourage you or encourage you either way. I'm just pointing out what I've discovered making this kit, and I've discovered that I like to consider myself a decent woodworker. I'd like to say I'm an advanced beginner. I know the fundamentals of woodworking. I know how to sharpen. I know how to saw to correct angles, things like that. This is probably a little bit beyond my skill level to make a working tool first time, first attempt. This thing's ready to go as soon as I sharpen the iron. You really need to experiment with it, put it that way. You really need the time and the will to mess with this. I'm in on this 2 weekends now. That's longer than I like. I had hoped to start a new project this weekend, but instead, as I said, I wasn't feeling all that great, and instead I ended up spending a few hours messing with this plane. I'm not going to say I regret it. I don't regret making it at all. It does work. You saw that it will function. But in hindsight, if I knew what I know now, yeah, I probably wouldn't have made it yet. I probably would have waited until I had more free time. I was a little bit more skilled, more ready to invest the time to make a plane like this. Maybe even I may even gone a step further and had a machine shop mill me a frog. There's a machine shop right behind my work. That all being said, give it a shot if you want to. Be prepared to be a little frustrated, possibly a little bit disappointed. Once again, I'm going to stress this is not a bad project. The hardware is excellent. I could remove this hardware and start from scratch. It shouldn't be a problem. But I'm not going to tell you that this project is dead simple or easy. There are a few tolerances that you really need to get dead on accurate for this tool to work correctly. And I mean dead accurate. There can't be any give or the tool just won't work. It's just that you're going to find out a lot in life, a lot if you worked around machinery. You'll find that machinery, just like tools, needs to be milled correctly. There can't be much slop in it. If there is, it won't work right. And in fact, it will get worse every time you use it, which I suspect if I do not use a shim on this plane, that might be the case. But yeah, I wish I could tell you more. I wish I had a better answer for you if anybody was watching this video and using my experiences as a gauge to whether or not they should try this. I wish I had a better answer. I unfortunately don't. I can only say that I would not recommend it to a beginner in the least. To an intermediate guy, to a pretty advanced woodworker. If you're looking to make a router plane, this is probably a great kit for you. if you're a new woodworker and you need a router plane, you want a router plane for your work, I would highly recommend going and buy one. They're not that much money. They're still relatively inexpensive in comparison to a lot of things that we see today. A gallon of gas is $5, so I spend $75 a week on gas. So if I couldn't afford to purchase a router plane, I probably wouldn't be woodworking to begin with. But yeah, it's I have. I'm going to leave you more frustrated than I am at the moment and say that I don't know. Either way, I hope this helped in some way, and I hope you guys have a great day, and hopefully see you again soon. Thanks.